is great. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, as sort of in the introduction, about how to increase your Scrum Master skills. I think, we can almost take it one step further and to say is, how can PMI's tooling, and this is a practice and process tool, how can we help that really increase that skill set from Scrum Master, to coach and team coach? So that's what we'll be talking about today. As in the introduction. So a little bit about me, just in the sense of where I fit into the world of Agile as far as PMI is concerned. I'm the brand lead for Discipline Agile engagement. So that means that I'm talking to clients globally, and I have a global role about their Agile journey, what they're doing, what's kind of going well, what's not going well, and where PMI can help with that. So I only focus on one brand. PMI has several brands that we are involved with. We have an organizational transformation brand. We have the Discipline Agile brand. We have obviously the PMP. We now have a citizen development brand, which is all about low code, no code. So we're in, and we have one called Wicked Problem Solving brand, which is a pretty interesting one. I even want to look at that from a meetup perspective at some point if you're interested. It's not my brand, but it's all about how do we visualize problems and be able to solve through them. So again, I think that's probably a really good Agile coaching type of tool, but it's not specifically in my brand. For those people who don't know, PMI is a not-for-profit. So we are, everything we do really comes down to one thing, and that is how do we make projects better? And I should say that, in this context, when I'm saying projects, I mean, we can interchange that with product development. So we can, certainly in my role, I mean, there's a lot of talk about, product development versus project development, et cetera. So I just want to because this group in particular, you're all, super knowledgeable on Agile and sort of the terminology. But in this sense, if I use the term project versus product, just, forgive me and let's build on it, right? So what all we're about is how do we make things better for project managers and for people doing projects, and primarily projects in product development. It's pretty cool. We've got 14,000 volunteers worldwide who help with it, and they're global. We have member groups or chapters, we call them, around the world that just do nothing but help people get better at project management. And I've been in the Agile community really since 2008, and even today, there's no global organization no global group that has done this kind of scale. I'd love to see that happen inside the Agile community. Maybe PMI will be part of it. Maybe we won't. I don't know, but I'd be interested in other people's comments on that. But right now we're 14,000 volunteers with regards to it. And that speaks a lot to the commitment that not just PMI as a global brand, which is what I'm part of, but really how much the people are committed to making this all successful. So what do? Well, we help to, I'm going to just turn that off there. We really focus on helping people accelerate their Agile journey. And I'm really talking about the Agile skill journey here. So, how do we, help reduce the risks? How do we develop internal leadership skills quickly? How do we make it so the organizations are more dependent on can build their own coaches and be able to get leverage there? As I mean, I'm sure everybody knows, finding an Agile coach these days is difficult, right? I mean, everyone's super, super busy. And so what we're all about is providing that leadership ability to make coaching more accessible to Scrum Masters and the people who've been doing it for a couple of years. I'm just going to talk a little bit about I'll pick one of our customers that we're dealing with. This is a bank in Brazil. It's called It's a bank who moved from waterfall to Agile, and they use Disciplined Agile as a practice guide. So I'm going to show you the practice guide in a little bit here. But they really like the idea of specialty roles, because we have specialty roles. So if you think of something like Scrum, for example, right, we've got really 3 roles, right? Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the team. And so there's a lot of gaps there, right? What do we do about architecture? What do we do about, special communities of practice and special, not interest groups, but people who are subject matter experts? How do we deal with that? And Scrum doesn't exactly talk about that specifically. So, so Itaú really liked Disciplined Agile because it gave them the ability to be able to do that. I'm just gonna see if I can't move. I can't move that, sorry. So we're a little bit different in the sense that we are not a framework. Disciplined Agile is not a framework at all. We add value to other frameworks, right? So, and actually, if you read the Scrum Guide, the most recent version of the Scrum Guide, it talks about the fact that, the Scrum framework is incomplete. This is on page 3 of the new one. And their point here is that the Scrum Guide was never designed to be a practice guide, right? It was designed to be a high-level process guide for people to rapidly adopt Agile through the framework of Scrum. And it does an amazing job. I can tell you, everywhere, everybody uses Scrum in some way or another. I mean, they may use, even if we're using something like SAFe, we're using Scrum or a Scrum-like work at the team level, as well as Kanban. But Scrum is predominantly what we're seeing in terms of the team level type work. So, what a lot of people think that the Disciplined Agile competes against Scrum, SAFe, etc., and we actually don't. And that's the marketing messaging that we're going to be addressing to make it a little more clear for people. But Disciplined Agile it's a collection of processes, and just like the slide says, and practices that give clear direction and trade-off on when to use which one. So it's almost like, not everybody wants to be a process sort of nerd, if you like, but this is a place where all the practices and all the processes that are available within, and not just within Agile, but within the software delivery ecosystem are hosted, and you can go there and be able to search for things. I'm going to show you how that works in a minute. But what makes Disciplined Agile different is the fact that we are organized, the DA is organized based on outcomes. Okay, so if you take something like Scrum, for example, right, it's organized based on practices, right? Same with SAFe. Do these things, and I understand there's some flexibility with all of this stuff, but primarily it's designed for, and that's the purpose of a framework, is to lay out a set of practices that you would normally use, at least as a starting point. The customization of those practices in the framework is where we would come in, right? To say, how can we modify these practices of these frameworks like Scrum and SAFe to make them more adaptable for the context of the work that people are doing. Sorry, I'm just looking for So the problem that we solve it then is, how do you adopt Agile, right? So we're not about how do you adopt SAFe or Scrum or anything else. We're about how do you adopt Agile, and how do you do it across an organization, at least everybody that touches the software delivery life cycles primarily. You can use it outside of IT, but how do you do that, and how do you do that in such a way that you maintain Agile and lean mindset throughout the process? And I'm going to show you how this all works based on really 3 things: based on being pragmatic, giving people the power of choice, and the concepts. Let me I want to just in the interest of time, I want to just show you how we organize DA. So remember I said DA is based on outcomes. Well, this diagram here is called the goal diagram. but it's all outcome related. So for example, and this is broken into, and this is the heart of DA. It's broken into 4 basic categories: inception, or getting started. And I understand for people who've been around a while, some of these terms look a little bit like rational unified process. For certainly the word inception does. But it's in 4 categories: inception, construction, transition, and then ongoing, which is ongoing improvement. So the way you read this is, think of yourself as a coach. And the question would be that the way you would read the first one, form a team, would be, what are my considerations when I need to form a team, right? What are my, well, I see someone's drawing, interesting. So what are my considerations when I need to align to enterprise direction? What are my considerations when I need to explore scope? So they're all outcome driven. There's 23 of them in total. So that's the difference, right? So because we're outcome driven, it means that we can choose multiple ways to get to that outcome, right? Because if a team can be formed, for example, it may be, it may be a group of people we've worked with before. It could be a brand new team. It could be an external vendor or whatever, but we still need to have the outcome of forming the team. And that's the difference. But because of that, right, it means that we can do this. And this is, we talk about DA being an agnostic process toolkit. And we have everything in there because we can pull now, because we're outcome driven, we can pull ideas from SAFe, we can pull ideas from Scrum, we can pull ideas from XP, we can pull ideas even from Waterfall if we wanted to, or what we call Serial. So we can pull it from anywhere, and we can take any idea. We're not saying you have to use a particular approach, but what we're saying is these are outcomes that you need to achieve, and how you get there can take a very different path depending on what you're doing. So let me so that gives you a sense of DA. I'm going to show you all this here on an online tool. I think it makes it a real lot faster. I've got a couple of different slides. I got a couple different scenarios. I'm going to pick one. Let's do this one here. So let's assume that you're going into a 40-person project that's going to last 2 years. And your first question is, what framework should I use? Should I use Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, hybrid, something else? What should that be? So so imagine you're a coach, right? And or you're a director in terms of a project. Now I understand in this case, you may very well know what it is. Oh, this is great. I finally got the chat up. Okay, this is great. Okay. How does this compare to Agile? Oh yeah, that's a great, yeah, you know something? Yeah, Ivar Jakobsen's Essence. I would say they're very similar, actually, to be honest with you. And when you listen to Ivar Jakobsen's Essence, certainly the marketing message of it sounds very similar. The major difference is this though. So Ivar Jakobsen has cards, right, for Scrum that he uses, that you can use with Scrum. And it's kind of built out that far. So think of DA almost has taken Essence and expanded it out much further. So the idea of Essence, very similar. The core of thought of it, tailoring your practices for sure. But we've just taken it that much further. And a lot of this is because DA was actually part of IBM in 2006. Scott Ambler developed it within IBM 2006 to 2012 and then took it out. So it's been around now for 14 years, right? So it's had a lot and of course now in PMI we have an IP team of 7 people who are working on this, as well as bringing in our people who are using DA, et cetera, to enhance it out. So we have a lot more capacity. Now, I should mention, we don't compete against Essence for sure. We have done we do webinars with Ivar as well, like Scott Ambler and Ivar Jakobsen. I saw was on a webinar with them just recently. So, but the idea is, yeah, choose the best set of tools that makes the most amount of sense. So it's a great question, by the way. I don't bump into a lot of people who've heard of Essence, that's for sure. So let me go. So remember our scenario, right? So 40-person project for 2 years. So what you should be seeing now is something called, whoops, daisy. Click share, you'll see it. What you should be seeing now is something called the DA browser. Maybe just in the chat, just put yes if that's what you're seeing, just to make sure we're in the same place. Yeah, okay. So in our scenario, we have 40-person project that's going to last 2 years, and our job is to figure out what's the right framework. So you'll notice this tool, and if you've read the book called Choose Your Wow, it's the book written by Scott Ambler and Mark Lyons. The first 108 pages or so really have a nice encapsulation of scaling Agile at the enterprise level, right? You know, thinking beyond Scrum, really. You know, like I talked about before, adding those roles that Scrum leaves out, being able to deal with architecture, just all those sort of really good core development pieces. The last part of the book, last 300 pages, are all tables, pretty much all tables, with some descriptions. And that's really what this tool is. This tool is a way to quickly navigate the knowledge base that Discipline Agile is. But it's laid out exactly the same as before. So inception, construction, transition, and ongoing improvement. So so we have 2 courses that are available. You can buy them online, or you can take them with instructor led. One's called the Discipline Agile Scrum Master, and the other one's called, I'm just reading the question. I'm going to read that in a second. So it gives you we take the course, Scrum Master, Senior Scrum Master. You have a chance to take a look and learn these tools much, much better. So, but in our case, I know how this works. So we're going to choose the one which is Evolve Your Way of Working. And the first one is to select the life cycle. So you'll see here that there are several life cycles here: traditional or waterfall, Scrum, exploratory, which is all based on lean startup, safe, and nexus. But let's just say we click on waterfall. So what DA does, it gives you a description of the practice. So in this case, software is built in a serial manner through a series of functional phases, requirements, design, programming, testing, etc. And then it gives you the trade-offs, right? So it's a comfortable approach for experienced IT professionals who have not yet transitioned to an agile way of working. It's appropriate for low-risk projects where the requirements and the problem is well known. For example, upgrading a workstation. However, time to market tends to be slower, and lean strategies can be. And so the trade-off. So then the idea is for that group could be lean strategies could be applied to traditional teams like lean change. So it gives you. The point is, it gives you a description of the practice, and then it gives you the trade-offs, what's good about it and what's not good about it. Same thing here for Scrum. So we all know what Scrum is, right? It's a partial life cycle focused on construction. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The life cycle focused on construction, leave the rest of the delivery up to you. Which I think we'd all agree, right? Scrum is for construction. And we go to safe. So it's the life cycle for large multi-team projects, etc. But it says here, it's oriented towards large programs between 50 and 250 people, organizing the teams of teams. So for us, we have a 40-person team. We would probably discount it, right? And then we pick one that was more appropriate. In our case, what most people are doing is what we would call the agile life cycle, which is kind of like Scrum with bookends, right? So transition, or it's kind of a DevOps piece into deployment, and a front end part of getting started. So this one's a pretty straightforward example, right? Picking a life cycle. But where DA really, and I did that just to give you a sense of how it's laid out. Where DA really helps is if you're an organization and you're trying to develop a common, a coaching skills within a broader broader part in the organization. So for example, the trends that I'm seeing right now is, organizations want to move away from the traditional Scrum Master role and really up that skill to coaches. Now, not everyone's going to want to go there, but that's where people are going, right? They're going towards agile coaching. And I think, the DA gives you a lot of help to do that. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're coming out of a Scrum class, or you're going into a project, and the first thing you need to do, remember, the outcome base, is form a team. So this would give you, and remember, the way you read it is, what are my considerations when I need to form a team? So here are your considerations, right? I think we all know this in this group, right? Expect you all know this, but where are my team members going to come from? And it gives us options later, just like before. New team members from another product, or we're going to be an existing product team. And you'll notice that some of these are highlighted, right? Are in bold rather. Well, the ones that are in bold are recommended practices. Recommended practices people can put into place. So same thing, right? And there are several different considerations for forming a team. How will the team evolve? It's going to be done with the coach or some sort of team lead, etc. Manage themselves. We hear this one all the time. I'm sure you guys do too. What's the size of the team? Should it be large or small? The nice thing here is, and I think I've been in a lot of conversations over the years where people say, why does a team have to be, a small team? Well, PMI through Scott Ambler, we give the trade-offs, right? So we say why it has to be, why it's a recommended practice. For example, why a small team is a recommended practice, because it's, they have, especially all the reasons everyone on this call knows why you want to have a small team, but it gives a third-party reference to it. So that can be pretty helpful. That can be very helpful, particularly when you're trying to scale coaching through multiple people in the organization, or trying to deliver some type of consistency across multiple stakeholders. And it just continues on like this. Now there's 143 of these decision points and considerations, and then that goes into it are our practices and industry practices, and there's about 1,500 of those that go into it. So that's why I call it an agile coaching type tool, because it gives that guidance on, we can teach, if I can teach one person this, I can teach 1,000 people how to do this. Understand how different, various levels of competency. I understand that. But if I put this in place with some good internal coaching, now we got a way to scale coaching and give some consistency across your organization, right? Now, one thing people normally say is DA's overwhelming, right? There's a lot going on here. And that's true, there is a lot going on, but it can be scaled back. So you could say, for example, if, you're an organization who, for example, let's just take team here. We all know that the team structure is going to be in a particular way no matter what. Then we could delete that, not delete, we could turn, it's like radio buttons, right? You could turn that off, and that option would go away. And that's effectively what DA is. Now, a lot of people, the number one thing organizations ask me about, or that I should say, the number one goal organizations are trying to achieve, and is getting faster to market. That's it. I ask a question of what's of these 5 dimensions, what's the most important? The dimensions I say are faster time to market, faster time to value, reduce cost, increase predictability, or increase quality. Those 5. And everybody always says the same thing. Well, we want all 5, but if you had to only prioritize one, it'd be faster time to market. And my guess is we got to be careful with faster time to market, because right beside it is faster time to value. And those two sound similar, but they're a little bit different. I think it's like taking value to market faster is really where is how I view it. Well, yeah, exactly. I'm just saying the way they say it is, I just read the question. How about faster time to market with quality? Yeah, absolutely. But the way they express it to me, they don't express it that way with quality. They should. I mean, they really should, but they don't. They say they purely, like, maybe because I segregate them into five different buckets. But you're absolutely right. It's got to be faster time to market with high quality, because otherwise we're not really sure what we're throwing out there, right? So I'm just reading the questions as we're going through here. So I heard you mention the organizations are moving from Scrum Master, Agile coaches. Wouldn't that depend on the budget? I understand the concept of a Scrum Master, your career progression will be toward Agile coaching role, but doesn't that require some enterprise knowledge, thinking, pay versus Scrum Master? Yeah, it does. I agree. But they're trying. So for example, I'm working with an insurance company right now, a life insurance company. They have 100 Scrum Masters. The Scrum Masters have varying levels of competency, right? And I have worked with a bank, exactly the same issue. They 300 Scrum Masters. The problem is that they want their Scrum Masters to have a higher skill set, right? They want them to be able to consistently be able to help make decisions for their team and for building teams. And they just don't think that they've gotten that through their current training, right? So that's what they're looking for. So as far as budget goes, I agree. But all of this is not, first of all, this tool online is online now, and it is no charge, right? So it sort of helps that way. That's certainly, I'm gonna put the link to the tool in the chat here for people. So this tool is online right now at no charge, the full tool. Eventually we're going to scale it back, right? Probably have one for Scrum teams, etc. So from a budget perspective, it's not super expensive, because you can use the tool and the training to learn how to use it. It maybe would be $1,000 a person. Sorry, I gotta just turn my heater off. So it's not super expensive. It may very well cause something else, which would be, that people would be upskilling it and then would leave. But, one of the customer, I mean, you've heard these stories before, I'm sure, right? Where people will say something like, it's not that we upskill our people and we're worried about them leaving. It's what do we do if we don't do that and they stay? Well, that's where a lot of people, particularly right now, is what a lot of people are thinking, right? So, but context counts, right? Every organization would be a little bit different in how they deal with that, for sure. I want to come back to that essence question, but I want to just share one more thing. So the number one thing people ask us for, priority, like I said, is faster time to market. Well, remember, we're outcome driven. So accelerate value delivery. We have a goal for that, or we have an outcome. How do you accelerate value delivery? And here is, and I'm not going to go through this for sure, but here are the considerations, because the way you would read this, right? What are my considerations to accelerate value delivery? And then you want to make decisions about choosing a deployment strategy, planning your deployment, automating your infrastructure, etc. And it gives you the options as well as recommended practices for those. So there's a lot here just for that one. And that one becomes a little, it's where we start getting into the more tricky ones, where things become, you really start to see the value of this. The other one is on developing a test strategy. This is one of our largest ones, because to the point about faster time to market with quality, and I'm 100% agree with you, 100%. We all know, we've seen it all, right? High quality reduces overall cost and increases time to market. There's no question about it. So you can see our testing one here. Our testing, how would you, so what are the considerations to develop a test strategy, are one of our largest ones. So I'm just going to turn my phone off here for a second. And with recommended practices to reach. So there's a lot going on with those. So that is So that's what Discipline Agile is all about. So, and that's why I called it. That's why I call it a coaching, tool, because if you're developing, complex systems, then it gives, and you need to scale that knowledge across multiple teams. It gives you that opportunity to be able to do that in a really effective way. Because today the reality is, if you're not doing this, right, then that means that this information is locked up in only probably the organizations I've been working with. Maybe if you're someone like a bank, 100,000 person bank, this information is probably in 10 people's heads, and that's about it, right? So this unlocks that and makes it available to other people, which is important because then it can become a repeatable business system, and you can actually modify this so that you can send it out to people in a controlled way. So that's why I call it that way. So some of the use cases, right, are, if, let's say, for example, your waterfall and moving to agile. Well, it gives you, if you look at some of these, it gives you basically a mini roadmap in terms of each one, right? Like each practice. So testing one's a bit. Let's go to explore scope, because that's one that we all, I'm sure, all know, right? Here are the considerations, right? So it gives you, I should mention one thing, and that is that some areas are not ranked. So for example, we talk about user stories. This is just a collection of practices. So they're not necessarily ranked, but it gives you what's in that category. So yeah, that's the idea of Discipline Agile. It gives you the practices you need to achieve those particular outcomes. So maybe we're 38 minutes. We got 20 minutes left. I want to read the question about essence, and maybe we'll take other questions if people want to either, or give me your feedback. I'm reading the question here. Essence is a language for practice engineering. I know DA thing, choose your wow book. They're really two different things, and I don't know Essence that well. I really don't. But when you read it, when I listen to the content for Essence, I read them as similar in terms of practices. So if you want to, by the way, I mean, if you can unlock your mic and talk to us about it, that'd be great too.
No, my point is just very simple. What I mean is you can very, very well use DA with Essence, and there is a huge gap in between. They don't even overlap in terms of coverage. So they really do two different things. Essence is a language for defining your own practices, because just getting the 9 pages of the guide in reality with your team, that's not your weird practice. Weird practice emerges. You keep solving problems. You keep adapting. You keep defining systems and structures. That's the real work. And it's a systemic work. And so Essence provides you a language, a formal language for everybody to do that.
Cool. Yeah. I had, like I said, I'm certainly not an Essence expert. That's obviously right. So yeah. I have to admit though, I don't hear of a lot of people using Essence. I've actually who have even heard of it. Do you find the same thing?
I work on the development. I don't know many people who have been using it yet. There's, in the community, people talk about it. A lot of people have been using it, but maybe in the hundreds. That's all. I don't know. It's not certainly not as widely spread as SAFe. I don't think it's there yet. I think it's being built, and it's not even hasn't even tried to launch yet.
Right. I've only seen Essence used with I saw. I was on a webinar once with Ivar Jackson. He was, I was watching the webinar, and there was a demo at some point about cards that we use with Scrum. So maybe with Jeff Sutherland. That's why I got to that reference. Anyway, so other questions, comments? I'm just reading this question.
Yes,
go ahead.
Sorry, John. Hi, I'm Max here from Austin. And I put the question in the chat, and it was thinking about more in understanding your customer, their needs, and making a decision on what framework you might use based on that. And I say that because not only at my present job, but in the agile transformations that I've helped lead and serve for 12 plus years, it's not just the fact of what do you as a development team or whatever feel comfortable with and what might work for you. You might have a need in regards from the customer that you have to make a lot of random ad hoc enhancements to your product like every 2-3 days. So maybe having to even have a Scrum sprint structure might not work very well because you can't even plan something solid for 2 weeks. So maybe a more Kanban approach would meet that need of the customer. Does your DA approach, like you talked about a lot of things that you could select, and that's great because some teams just need something to start up with. But is there a way to take it from the customer focus? Because at the end, that's what it's for, delivering some kind of value to a customer that hopefully will pay you because they appreciate the value.
Right.
Is there a way to take it from that approach, right? Saying, my customer needs this, 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 and then it spits out some cool options.
Right. Yeah, it has to be in that instance, it would need to be in the hands of a coach, right, or a consultant. So I'll give you an example where we see something similar to that. A lot of SI firms use this. Well, this is a little bit different than what you said, but slightly different. A lot of SI organizations use it as a way to negotiate with their customers what the framework will look like they're going to build with. So they use it that way. And then so now into, how long a sprint should be, etc. Those are still in the hands very much of the coach, right? Just like you're doing right now. What this would give is, but where the SIs use this is a way to validate, and that's what we're seeing from partners too. Being able to validate, helping to more quickly validate the decisions. SIs are systems integrators. Yeah, system. So people who build software for somebody else. Yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah, people who build software. So what it doesn't do, and this is and where we're going is, how do we put in the problem, right? How do we put the problem in, and then have this help to select the practices that make it go. Yes. You can search for things. So you can do that, right? So you can say, tell me about, I'll just pick one here, right? And this isn't really the answer to your questions, but this isn't, but
and I wasn't, my intention was not to derail it entirely going down a customer track, but I feel that is a flaw that I've seen in a lot of frameworks, in a lot of ways that we work, is that, it starts from the customer and it starts from having to satisfy a particular need of the customer and to deliver a value. And sometimes I think if it would start from there, then there would be even possibly a way to measure how you're doing according to where you started from, the customer value. But
no, I totally agree.
I'll be quiet now. I'll be quiet.
No, it's a great question, and I 100% agree. I really 100% agree. What would be, we're working with a large consulting partner who's building something that is basically it's a knowledge base practices, not just for agile development, but like a much larger one. And what they're talking about doing is building in an AI front end to it, to be able to use that as a decision, to be able to choose the practices. So I can see something, and we're not there yet, but I can see us plugging into something like that, and then just like you say, right, be able to have some way to make that guidance automatically or simplify it, But we're not there yet. So this DA has been part of PMI for like 2 years, and we're still building this out, of course. But you're not linked with this. You're not the first person to mention that. It's great. It's perfectly makes sense, right?
Yeah, but the IBM folks, like they didn't think about this. No, I'm joking.
Well, remember that was 2006. Right, so they were,
but there were customers out there that really wanted value in 2006.
I know.
No, and sorry, John, I'm being cheeky. I just think that there's some companies have been very successful. The one that comes to mind is Amazon. Amazon just has a very customer centric approach, and they build so much from the customer needs down, right? But
100%.
no, but thanks, John. Thanks.
I read the Jeff Bezos books, and I just think he has done an amazing job of customer, right? He puts customer first, like first, second, and third is customer. And what I love about Jeff Bezos and what he's done is he's also does testing, right? He tests, right? The money's, I think he wants says the money's in the test, right? So yeah, I'm totally into that for sure. Would you have an example of how DA helped or could help people out of software development, such as marketing errors to the 10 clients within a company? I'd love to hear some more examples. So sure. So the way people, just set this down. So outside of software, so we're working right now, getting current example, working with an organization that manufactures beverages. And so what they're doing is they're set up agile teams that are they're within their beverage R&D system. So the way they're going to use it is as a tool to build their teams and do innovation. So we're going to use an innovation team. So remember, not software, R&D. Okay. So what
I had a question.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I went to your browser thing, but it doesn't quite look the same as yours. Do you have to log in or something? Because for example, I would go and explore the scope and it would give me sort of a description of what that activity involves, whereas you have kind of a tree of different types of sub-activities. So yeah, so I was just kind of curious about that because they're showing us the tool.
Yeah, no, that's fair. There's multiple versions of the browser. So I'm showing version 5. But if you went right to the newest version 5.5, it's actually a little different. So
okay.
Went to
Mine
top
says it's 5.0, but
okay, share your screen. Let's see it.
Oh, I don't know how to share it. I'm probably doing something evil, like using Microsoft Edge, which is against all software laws. How do I share a screen? Let's see.
But the other thing I'd mention, George, is that, and John, if you want to take that scroll bar that's in the middle up and down, like that may be what it does start out. Yeah.
Oh, it starts out like this. Yeah.
Oh, Phantom. Okay, I get it.
If you pull that up, you'll
There's
see that.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, no, copy. I can't see the scroll bar, but okay, so a scroll bar exists that I'm obviously
I'm using Chrome, by the way. I'm using Chrome. So
yeah, I should do that. I have to admit that the world has shifted away from anything Microsoft in browsers. All right, anyway, that was my curiosity question. I'll try it with Chrome.
Okay. So if we look at the beverage companies, but they need to do some things, right? They need to build teams. So these aren't software related things, right? Where the team's going to come from, how big the team should be, etc. Where there should be in time zones, how we're going to support the team. Those are not software related things. So they're using it that way. And also really in ongoing. So all the things in ongoing are more general in that way. So you'll notice that, so here's the way we read is, what are my considerations to governing a team? Well, things that the center, and this is being driven by their center of excellence, right? What will go into governance? And so, how we're going to motivate enterprise awareness, enable teams, and of course there's the decisions below it. So we have people using DA in that way for marketing, for R&D. We're not doing it in sales, but those are the areas. And we've actually got something pretty interesting, and it's just in pilot, so we're just kind of having it. It's a one-day workshop on Discipline Agile. So Discipline Agile has basically 3 major components. It has the goal diagram, which is important. It has the complexity, diagram, which shows if we disperse teams and just put all the complexity that would go into the making the product. And the last one is how do we pick the framework, the flow chart that helps with some of that decision cycle. So there's those three major components you learn in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's all scenario based. How do you use it in whatever? So the scenarios are, how could you use in one case, for one organization, it might be, how do you use it for R&D? The next one could be, how do you use it for software? The next one could be, how do you use it for marketing? And that's what we're developing, so that you can use it in multiple spaces. And by the way, I mean, if your organization wanted to run one of those workshops, they're in pilot right now. If you want to run it for marketing or something else, they're going to be in pilot for another month and a half. So it's at the end of May. I'd be happy to, for a team of 15, I'd be happy to come in, and we don't provide it ourselves, but provide it with a partner with our help. Be happy to do one of those sessions with the group, and go to really get a sense of how you'd use it outside of IT. The only thing we ask, if you're at all interested in that, is that you provide feedback on the product so that we can make improvements. That's it. So, and it's a simple NPS brief survey. So he uses Scrum for sales. Yeah, which makes sense. I think yeah. I'm just looking at these questions here now. One place I would. Yeah, I would agree with that about the Amazon one, by the way. Individuals, yeah. I tend to agree with that one for sure. It's just software. Yes, and you can use it. Yeah, still says software. So what do we got? We have 7 minutes left. So maybe I'll hand it back over to the facilitator. Unless there's other questions, happy to take them, or I'm going to hand it back over to the facilitator.
Yeah, I think we do have some time for some more questions. We usually go to the top of the hour. I did want to, before we get there, thank John for his time and also for showing this tool, and also for PMI being a nonprofit and handing this stuff out for free. This is really awesome. So any other questions, feel free to type them, since we got about 5 or so minutes left for those. You can type them into the chat or take yourself off mute.
I have a question for John. So what's the pathway for somebody who gets started with DA? So I'm not going to try to suck all this knowledge on practices and these trees into my head. I don't think that's meaningful. What's the career pathway for me to get started with it?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to take it depends on your skill set. So if you've been around a while and you got a good solid Scrum background, we have a course called the Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master. I'm going to pull it up here in a sec, and that would be your starting point. If you have that skill set. If you don't, I'm going to just have to go through some slides here to get to that one. In my opinion, the Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master, I'm just looking for the certification slide, is really an Agile coaching, team coaching type designation. So that's where it starts. There we go. Yeah. So many people already probably have the ACP, or they've certainly heard about it. The ACP is part of DA, but we don't talk too much. It's not a major part of our brand. So normally you would start at the Discipline Agile Scrum Master, which is a beginner course, but you really need to have Scrum knowledge to take that. We don't say that, we don't highlight that on our marketing, but you're really at an advantage if you have Scrum. And then we have the Senior Scrum Master, which is really the team coach, to give you a sense of what the plateau looks like. Here's what the Scrum Master one looks like. And we're probably, I should mention, we're very likely changing the name of these things, because the Scrum Master one, like I mentioned before, we're not really a framework at all, right? We are a collection of practices, and we help people become more agile. We've gone with the term Scrum Master. That was a decision made about 2.5 years ago, and we're likely going to be changing that. But the beginner course, or the starting course, I guess you could say, we do a review of Agile, probably, not necessary for a lot of people, I would suspect. We talk about value streams. We talk about how you build a DA team. We talk about how you choose the options. I talked about those 3 core things I talked about for they're part of that. And then how do you tailor your practices based on the 4 major boxes: inception, construction, transition, ongoing. And then how do you manage influences outside the team? So even if you look at that agenda, it is the beginning of an agile coach, right? And that's where we start. And then we have the senior Scrum Master, which to me, I'd be interested in maybe you guys would be interested in your feedback on this. There are 9 lessons in total, but you read them, right? Team development for high-performing teams, emotional intelligence for high-performing teams, tactical scaling in complex situations. Oops, so easy. Optimizing how we work with DevOps, optimizing how we work with value stream layer, coordinating across teams, conflict management, pragmatic planning, pragmatic reporting, metrics, right? So that's very much a agile team coach type of a software, or approach. Yeah, I'm just reading the chat here as well. So, but it all depends on where you're at. I think if you're trying to learn the very basics of it, I would say, if you've got a few years of agile experience, I would go to the SSM. It does require you to do some reading in advance. So you got to buy the book. If you're a PMI member, you get it for free, but you can buy it on Amazon. It's not that expensive. You read the first 108 pages of the book and take the SSM. The goal diagram I talked about is covered in the SM material. So you've got to understand, you really need to understand that, but that is not covered in the SSM. So if you have more time, take them both. If you don't have more, if you're constrained that way, then learn the goal diagram in the book and then take the SSM. That's how you would do it. Now, beyond that, it gets really exciting. So you're able to go from the team coach, the SSM, which is the, right, to the DA coach is more of an enterprise coach. And then to our highest designation, which is the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant. So that is all about Al Shalloway's material. So PMI bought 2 companies, right? They bought Discipline Agile and they bought Net Objectives. Net Objectives owned by Al Shalloway. Al Shalloway is the lean expert who developed our value stream material, which is based on material he has flexed. I'm happy to come back a different time and talk about value streams and kind of where we're going with that. But the certification for that would be the last stage. But to get there, you need to get everything beyond that's in purple at the right, you need to have the SSM. So that, depending on where you're starting, you got to go through the SM no matter what. All right, we got 1 minute left.
Well, yeah, I think we can wrap it at this point,
Okay.
John. So yeah, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us today. I will stop the recording.